on the lines, Winston Shrout Solutions in Commerce, upcoming webinar, darlings, Saturday, February 23rd from 10 a.m. to noon, and this one sounds incredible. Accept for value, return for value, a metaphysical perspective. Let me read a little bit about Winston's thoughts on this fascinating new topic. And this is Winston speaking. I'm speaking too. I have a long time stated that to more fully understand many of the commercial redemption concepts, that one would be well served to consider these things from not only the point of view of the physical world, but to also venture a bit further for a fuller understanding, perhaps into the metaphysical realms. Certainly to know the mechanics of a technology is important for a successful completion, but what would be of even more lasting value is to develop confidence in the technology by digging a bit deeper into the why of how it works. And in this way, in the days of old, we had mystics and magicians, seers, soothsayers, crystal ball gazers, etc., all of which astounded and mystified the uninitiated. But all of their miracles and performances were based on principles, many of which are demonstrated daily in our high school science classes. On the lines, Winston Shrout, Solutions in Commerce. Mr. Shrout, so fantastic to be with you again.
Well, glad to have this little conversation. We always have a good time when we speak together.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, now this is something just absolutely dear to my heart, the metaphysical principles to some of this commercial technology that you will be presenting on February 23rd. Why are you feeling at this point it is time to pull back the curtain and to talk about some of the esoteric principles of the technologies at this time, sir?
Well, it's kind of a conscience thing with me. I had to come out of the closet. We in the things that we try to demonstrate to people, we're trying to find real solutions to real life situations, that people face from day to day and year to year in their commercial doings and so forth. And so a lot of times we don't look beyond the present situation and the consequence of that. A lot of times folks, are able to for instance, flip the switch and the light comes on, but they have no idea where the electricity came from.
Yes.
And so I think probably with this webinar here, what I want to emphasize is the higher thinking. As you know, and as a lot of people across the world are experiencing, we're coming into a renaissance, as it were, and in a period of enlightenment. And so, in respect to that enlightenment and elevation of vibration and thinking and so forth, I thought it might be a good idea to reevaluate or to take another look at this concept of acceptance, from that perspective. So that people would not only know how to fill out the paperwork and whatnot, but have some measure of the idea of why we do that. Now, for instance, I've told people, year in and year out, that because of the bankrupt situation that we operate, and the whole planet for that matter, because we all operate, all the countries, governments, and so forth operate in bankruptcy, that the only remedy that we have is in fact acceptance. And so to get the background, perhaps from a higher perspective of why that is, that's what the thrust of what we want to developed with this new webinar.
Well, it's so interesting, sir. Over the course of our conversations, I've never asked you, in a sense, why you term your strategies as technology. It's like it seems to be a key that, or a map that helps to unlock a secret, a puzzle, a code. Could you tell us more about just the whole idea of this as technology? Does that mean that we are inside technology? Are we of technology? Are we controlled by technology? And what is that?
Well, you might sort of compare it to, dimensional thinking. For instance, when we deal with paper, I mean, there's ink on paper that conveys ideas and so forth, but you have to realize that the paper itself is only a two-dimensional situation, and so that's a pretty low form. And then as we want to take the paper and cause it to have some effect in other dimensions, then we have to go into the third dimension, which is the physical realm that we all walk and talk and breathe and move across the planet in. So that's the third dimension. Now, I have to say that, just to consider life and the things that we do, from a third dimensional point of view is pretty short-sighted. And so in order to elevate our thought process, to come to a better understanding and so forth, then we have to go into a fourth dimensional style of thinking so that we're not completely bound down, to just the physical world. Now, some people like to refer to this, fourth dimensional concepts and so forth as being metaphysical or spiritual and so forth. And so this is what we're seeking for. Now, for instance, an analysis, for the last number of years in regards to church attendance, it's generally demonstrated that the attendance at a formal or a structured church, that attendance has fallen off dramatically, and the people are seeking for spiritual enlightenment in relationship, to God and all those kind of things that apparently they felt like that they were not receiving within the four walls of a chapel. And so it's the same thing, I think, all the way around. There's a certain amount of enlightenment and energy and vibration that's being infused into the planets and into the minds and the hearts of the people. And so they're seeking for a new dimensional, a new way to look at things, or perhaps a explanation for what is going on in the physical world. And so the purpose of this seminar here is to perhaps give some guidelines, some suggestions, and so forth that people could use, and in particular in regards to this acceptance for value thought process in correlation basically with spirituality.
Now, I have heard about accept for value, sir. Tell us a little bit about return for value and some of the items you'll be highlighting about that.
Well, the return is important. It could be return for value. It could be return for closure and settlement, or just whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. With what your situation is. So we could call it accept for value, return for value, or return for closure and settlement, and these kind of things. The purpose of it is to stop the disintegration of our financial system. Now, why I say that is that because in our present circumstances, most of the planet is operating with what we call open accounts. And when we talk about open accounts, we're talking about accounts that are accruing interest. In other words, the interest is running on an open account. And we see the results of that. I mean, because of all this interest, in whatever form you find it across the planet, our currencies are devaluated, the value of the products are devalued. I mean, everything is just basically going to, pardon the expression, going to hell in the handbasket. And there doesn't seem to be any way to stop it, but there is a way to stop it, and that is to stop the running of interest. And so one of the techniques that can be used to stop the running of interest and the devaluation of all of the things that we have is to accept the account and the accounting which closes the account, and then from the closed account, then we can reach a zero balance. So, for those who have been paying attention to the financial world and some of the things that are happening, I mean, you hear comments, something along the line of toxic derivatives as a ruination of our financial system. Where do you think all those toxic derivatives came from? See, it's a situation, where the value of what's called interest has gone completely haywire. And so, if that be the case, then ought we not to apply some correction to the situation? And the answer is yes, we should. And so the question gets to be then how should we accomplish that? And the obvious answer for those who understand some of these principles and so forth is to accept the debt and apply the proper credit to that debt to reduce that open account where interest is running, to reduce it to a closed account with a zero balance. Now, these might be thought processes and concepts that might be unfamiliar to many, but that's why I spent the last 8 years trying to teach.
Well, and the great thing is coming up on February 23rd, and that is a Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon. That's exactly what Winston is going to be doing. And he's going to take you to a whole different dimension to look back at the technology that you are putting into practice, that you're learning about and delving into, and telling you why and how it works. It is called Accept for Value, Return for Value, a metaphysical perspective. Winston's upcoming webinar. You need to go ahead and call 503-538-7100, 503-538-7100. Register now. It's just coming up around the corner. It's going to be 2 hours of profound information, and you have a couple of ways. You can do tuition only. Probably the best, though, is to do the attendee package, because then not only are you live there on the webinar, but also you get a DVD recording of the presentation, and the best thing, a transcript. So you can highlight, you can note take, you can sit there and follow the labyrinth of amazing information that Winston gives, and to help be a part of your library of understanding. And so, Winston, why is there, and this is kind of a silly question, but the origination and the idea of metaphysical principles that underlie some of these technologies we work in the 3D, what does that say about our relationship to commerce?
Well, let me give you a little example that might be helpful. Some years ago, I was listening to a taped conversation between a couple of individuals, and one fellow was asking the other, about how to solve, a commercial problem. And so it was explained in, fairly good detail what ought to be done to resolve that particular issue. And then the individual asked do I do when that doesn't work? And the answer was, that's your problem. It's not going to work because you don't believe it, you see. Now, over the years, I've had the opportunity to speak to a great number of people who were working on this acceptance technology, and some would say, "Wow, we've done this on like 6 or 7 different occasions. It's worked very, very well." Then I hear other people complain and say, "I've done this 10 times and it hasn't worked a single time." Now, what causes that disparagement between those two individuals? Right. Could it be that they do not believe in what they're doing, or could it be that the success that one individual reported was because he did believe what he was doing? Now, what would cause one to believe and the other not to believe, you see? And so we run into these situations. And so perhaps the unbeliever, if I can use that term, perhaps the unbeliever was not as well prepared to venture out in that direction because of not having a full understanding. Now, people do things from time to time simply because their back is against the wall, and that's a crapshoot. I mean, sometimes it'll work out okay, and sometimes it doesn't, and so forth. But how much more enhancement could someone have in anything they do? Whether it's baking a cake or whatever. How much more would their effort be enhanced if they understood the underlying principles upon which baking that cake or doing an acceptance for value is based, you see? And so I often tell people that, whatever energy, that they put into a piece of paper, even though it's just a second dimensional item, I said, whatever energy that you put into that court pleading or that acceptance or whatever it is you're doing, that energy will go with that. And if you have positive energy based upon knowledge and so forth and so on, that's a much better scenario than someone who has absolutely no faith or little faith in what they're doing. They're just doing it because Winston said to. So you see what I mean? So yes. You see the difference. And so that energy, which again is a fourth dimensional concept, is something that may make or break the deal.
Well, I think that is absolutely beautiful, because what you're doing, Winston, also is telling folks, hey, there is some personal responsibility that comes with it, because you gotta trust, and you gotta believe when you execute these instruments. It's got to be a full package, and that the investment is in their own hearts and their own education. But you're right. Some folks do it because their back's up to the wall. But I think this is a really fascinating foundation that you're going to be laying out for them on Saturday, February 23rd, from 10 a.m. till noon Pacific Standard Time. It's Winston's latest live webinar, Accept for Value, Return for Value, a Metaphysical Principle. You can call 503-538-7100 or go right to the website, www.wssic.com, Winston Shrout Solutions in Commerce, and you can register right there. Make sure it is a part of your library. And make sure and get the attendee package. It's the best value. You get the DVD, you get the transcript, and you're part of a live, growing cadre, vanguard of people that are putting out this positive energy for change all around the planet, sir. And so, in these closing moments, Winston, what do you think is going to be a part of the lecture? How are you going to structure this? How are you going to get into the metaphysics of this technology?
Well, one of the things I'll be doing I have access to a series of books entitled Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. And what it was an expedition that was launched in the late 1800s and early 1900s by a group basically who were looking at archaeology and some of those things. And they went into the Himalayas, Tibet, and some of those places. And in the course of their travels, that they ran into and had quite a bit to do with many of the ascended masters. Now, the ascended masters are those individuals who have lived mortal lives and who have basically raised their vibration and so forth to the point that they pass out of the third dimension into, at the very least, the fifth dimension. Certainly a lot of people are very familiar with one of those, the entity known as Saint Germain. But in any event, in these travels and in these sessions or conversations with some of these elevated folks, and there were men and women as ascended masters who dealt with these explorers. And in any event, I'll be bringing to the table some of the higher teachings, as a comparison, to what we're trying to do with accepted for value. Now, as I have looked at some of these experiences, some of the things that were said, some of the concepts that were put forward by these ascended masters, I immediately recognized exactly the direction, that I have been trying to go for some time to help people to get to get an elevated view of mundane things. And I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was down, I think, in South Carolina. Did a 2-day workshop down there for a whole lot of folks. Just real good folks down there. Quite a few turned out for it. Anyway, we spent 2 days together, and then when my sponsor was taking me back to the airport to return home, one of the attendees at the seminar called him on the phone. He said, "Hold on, go put this on speaker." And so this fellow came on the line. He says, I got it. And I said, "Well, what did you get?" He said, "You were giving us a spiritual message." And I said, "Yeah, you got it." And so I've talked to several people who have made the comment. For instance, they were either at a seminar or they were listening to some of the seminar DVDs that we produce, and they say, "I've listened to that whole thing 3 or 4 times, and every time that I listen to it, I get something new." Now, they were listening to the exact same things that I said in the same manner and so forth, but they were elevating their thought process so that each new time that they listened, to what I had to say, they were able to receive something just a little bit higher and higher and higher. And so that's what we try to do, with the things we put out to people, whether it's acceptance for value or whether it's some other technology that we're trying to work with, is that, at whatever level you're at, if you're only on the 3D level, you'll hear that message. If you move into a fourth dimensional thought process, you'll hear that message. And so again, it depends on the people and what it is they're seeking. And if they're seeking 3D logic and technology, that's what they'll receive. But if they're looking for perhaps a bit of spiritual enlightenment, it's there. And so that's what we're going to do this webinar here coming up. Going to perhaps give it a few keys to understanding, so that people can move up in their abilities and so forth.
Well, Winston, it sounds fascinating. It sounds right on time, and what a great foundation and a great a graduate webinar that you're going to be holding on February 23rd, Saturday from 10 a.m. till noon. Accept for value, return for value, a metaphysical perspective. Please call 503-538-7100. It's tuition package. Attendee package includes a DVD and transcript. And there is Winston just going global and using the technology to bring you the principles behind so many amazing gifts of sovereignty out there for you to practice. And so, Winston, again, sir, thank you so much for being such an archangel for everybody over the planet and inspiring them to grow into knowing themselves so much more richer and deeper.
Well, I, along with many others, are simply trying to extend to others, that which we have received. And so the Scripture says, where much is given, much is required. And so I have been given very, very much, and I'm trying to give back.